This month is Indigenous Peoples Month, and we are talking about that specifically in our service today. And we begin with this land acknowledgement. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across barriers of heritage and difference. For millennia, the Kumeyaay people have been a part of this land. This land has been nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. At University Christian Church, we acknowledge this legacy, we promote this balance and harmony, and we find inspiration from this land, the land of the Kumeyaay. We often go through Indigenous Peoples Month, and we forget to recognize the native peoples who were here first. Today, we are pleased to have with us Ballet Folklorico and Etzlan, and I hope that you will please join me in welcoming them for the Four Directions ceremony. I grew up in a small church. It was the kind of church where the pastor did everything. Preached on Sunday morning, went and visited people, prepared sandwiches for those in need, and then ended Sundays by leading the youth group when I'm sure he was exhausted and we came exuberantly. And so the church eventually decided to hire a part-time youth minister. His name was Dan. And he came with so much enthusiasm and energy. We loved going to Sunday school and going to youth group when Dan was going to lead it. And then came Youth Sunday, and we all had different parts in the service. I don't remember what I was doing, but I do remember that Dan was preaching. And I remember he preached all over the stage. He got a wireless microphone, and he moved all around, and it was very energetic. His delivery was wonderful. The problem was the content of his sermon. He preached on John 3:16, and he told the congregation that Jesus was the only path to God. And if you didn't believe that, you were in trouble. Our pastor quickly found him after the service and said, "That is not what we believe in this church. We believe that we are following the path that Jesus trod, but that there are other paths of truth." And I remember the youth minister walking out very worked up about this, and he came to my family because my grandpa was a minister and was the minister at that church at one time, and he said, "I need to talk to him. I want to know if this is what all disciples' congregations believe." So we gave him my grandpa's phone number a little reluctantly, and later in the day I thought, maybe I should call him and let him know that this call was coming. By the time I had called him, the call had already come. And I suppose my youth minister didn't get the answer he wanted from my grandpa either because he never came back. But I remember my grandpa talking to me and saying, Caleb, God cannot be confined to one religion. God cannot be defined by our human understandings of what God is. And I remember him talking in particular about native spirituality and about the Great Spirit and about a great respect for the ways that we are interconnected to one another. We in the church commit to following the path that is trod by Jesus, to following his example, recognizing that it is but one of many paths that lead to this great sacred mystery that is beyond us, that we in our tradition call God. The table is actually a reminder of that. A lot of people think that you need to make some kind of a confession to come to the table. I don't believe that at all. I don't think that's what the table's about. I think the table is about breaking down those barriers and reminding us in this sacred mystery that God's presence is beyond our understanding. And yet, in some way, whenever we share this together, whenever we commit to being community together, God meets us right here and enters our heart. Come to the table today, ready to encounter the presence of the living God.
Today's scripture reading is an interpretation of the first creation story found in the book of Genesis. It constitutes the prologue of the First Nations translation of the Bible, which honors indigenous traditions. Hear what God's Spirit is saying to you. Long ago, in the time before all days, before the beginning of all things, the Great Spirit created the spiritual world above and the earth below. At the time, our Mother Earth was an empty wasteland with no form or beauty. Great darkness was over the face of the ancient deep waters. The breath of the Great Spirit moved over the surface of the waters like an eagle brooding over her nest. Creator sounded his voice, "Let light be," he said, and light was. The Great Spirit could see the light was good, so he separated the light from the darkness. Creator gifted the light with the name day, and to the darkness he gave the name night. Then night faded and morning came, the first day. In 6 days the Great Spirit made all things seen and unseen. He made the spirit world above and the earth below. He created spirits to be his messengers and helpers. He also made the sun, moon, and stars, and all plants and animals. He made the great waters and all who swim in them, the winged ones who fly in the sky, the four-legged ones who walk on the ground, every creeping thing that crawls. All were shaped and molded by his hands. On the 6th day, Creator made the first man and woman and placed them in the garden of beauty and harmony to be caretakers of the earth. On the 7th day, the Great Spirit rested from his work of creation, not because he was tired, but because he was finished. The Great Spirit blessed the 7th day and made it a holy day. So humankind was created to enter into his day of rest and remain in harmony with Creator and care for all creation. Here ends the reading of words that give us insight into God. May God grant us wisdom and courage for interpretation.
Maestra Viviana, thank you so much for being here today. We are so grateful for your presence here and for your willingness to share. So I'll invite you to sit down with me, as you will, and here's a microphone. And as I said, one of the things that we envision this kind of holy conversation being is kind of a mutual sharing. This whole service is a mutual sharing of traditions as we come together and learn about, what it is in our society that allows us to thrive. And that's when we understand each other and we have respect for each other and we see value in each other's traditions. And so I'm grateful for your willingness to come and do that, because I know that churches are not always the most welcoming places and churches are not always comfortable spaces. And so I appreciate you taking a chance on us and coming here and being a part of this. And I also thank Marcella Salgado for arranging this. Thank you, Marcella. I appreciate it. And as I understand it, I think Amani took dance lessons with you all, didn't she? So thank you all. Thanks for being here. So if you don't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in dance and how all of this came to be.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for having us here today in these days and times as we start to gather again. For us, this is a fairly newer thing or recent thing to start to gather after being in isolation or apart, as we would say. And also that, yes, we're Ballet Folklorico Naslan. I'm maestra, or artistic director or CEO of Ballet Folklorico Naslan, which has been in existence since 1962, so over 50 years. And yes, thank you to Marcella sharing her family with us, especially Amani. It was a pleasure and a joy to open the floor to her and her aspirations, her dreams, and to see her continue to flourish. So I'm very proud of you, Amani. Thank you for all your energy you share out there in the world. I know what that means. The other thing is we are also, in this form, so to speak, Danza Koyo Shauki. Some of you might see our little picture of what we call our estandarte, or our standard of who we are. It's an ancient dance form based primarily in what is now considered the Mexican indigenous dance traditions or more recognizably known as Aztec Dance or Sacred Conchero Dance from Mexico.
But that's wonderful.
And so how did I get into this? A long time ago, many years ago, I was actually thrown out with the furniture in a fire in my family's house in Texas. When I was first born, I had just come home when I was 3 days old or something, and there was a fire, and so they threw me out. And so they say that is part of the beginning of who I am now, a flyer, as I see the birds up on your windows and around. And so I'm also known as a caretaker of ancient tradition of Danza de los Voladores, or the flyers. And that is also a big part of what Danza Azteca is now as well. So, and it started a long time ago.
I love that, and what a rich history with the tradition. That's incredible. So I was thinking as we were preparing for this Sunday that a lot of us may not know a lot about kind of indigenous beliefs, and I was curious if you belong to a certain indigenous tradition, if you could talk some just about what kind of some of the basic beliefs are.
Well, with danza coyoshauqui, or ancient Aztec dance or conchero dance, that is has a specific parameters or aspect or look to it or style or way. Like in Mandalorian, this is the way. But
you're after my own heart. I love it.
So how we dance in a circle, how we set up our table or our altar, our mesa, as we call it, our altar, is very specific to those traditions of danza, ancient dance. But I am also a caretaker of many traditions. And the form of ballet folklorico, that is like this church in a way, in that we see a physical structure and a door, a location, a means through which people can come and arrive and encounter what you share with them, what this church is about. And so ballet folklorico is sort of like that, because it is a pathway or doorway to our culture as indigenous Mexican people from this continent, from this hemisphere. And so the traditions, the dances, there are very many because it contains many different regions of Mexico, 32 different regions, and then all the indigenous peoples and subcultures within those different regions or states, as well as the class levels and historical levels, pre-Columbian, Columbian, et cetera, more modern times. And so this church sort of represents ballet folklorico in that it's a way for you to come and to learn or express yourselves spiritually in this cultural context. You know yourselves as United, what is it? University Christian
Church.
Christian Church. So our University Christian Church is sort of, so to speak, like ballet folklorico in Aslan. But the real teachings, the Sermon on the Mount, where there is no physical church, or didn't used to be when it first happened, is sort of like the concept of danza. It's a very ancient teaching, very ancient way of life, and it is concepts that were and are pervasive throughout this whole hemisphere, in that many of the basic concepts, such as respect, is the premise of what most indigenous people throughout this hemisphere, and indeed throughout the world, because there are indigenous people throughout the world, from all parts of the world, who had that concept of respect. And most indigenous people, the reason or why or how we call ourselves indigenous is because we still maintain a connection to la naturaleza, to nature, to each other, you are my other self. Tú eres mi otro yo. In Lakesh, some of you have heard that before. So we know that this is something that is not only in Mexico, not only here with the Kumeyaay, not only in the northern territories, but throughout this hemisphere. And then we also know of our indigenous brothers and sisters in other parts of the world who are striving to maintain their connection to La Naturaleza as well. So this is some of what I carry, not only the traditions here of this land, but I've been held, and responsible for maintaining some of the traditions and ceremonies from throughout the world.
That's beautiful. I love that. And I love that you are my other self, you know, and in our tradition, we often talk about that as, you know, seeing the face of God in every person, and looking out and seeing the other person as sacred. And I love that, that focus on caring for each other. Man, if our world were more like that, wouldn't that be better? Yeah, I love that. So I'm curious too how like current beliefs and practices relate to historic beliefs. And so I think some people may have baggage, for instance, in thinking about like Aztec dance, like with historic Aztec practices or things like that. How do current beliefs and practices relate to kind of what historic traditions have been?
Well, like many churches, some are just on TV and raising money.
Yeah. Does that happen?
I believe so from what I hear on some of the news stories. And some people are not so kind and nice to each other or to the other peoples who do not look and believe exactly the way they do. And so with any tradition, you will have that, or any peoples, with any cultures, you will have those outliers who are lying, so to speak, laying and lying outside of the parameter of what a culture or tradition or ceremony, something sacred should be. And so we know humanity is not all perfect. We have not reached that level. The majority of humanity has not yet reached that level. And so we know that there are those who do not behave properly. And that happened in the past, and that happens now, hoy día, as well. So what we carry is the sacred. What I carry, what I am responsible for, is the sacred. So within that parameter of what is sacred, what is honorable, what is honest, what is true, what is respectful, what is proper, that is the best thing I carry from the past. And that has always been so, and that will continue for eons. It's much older than many people think, most people think. Oh, this is just 500 years ago since the conquistadores came. But this tradition, this way of life, this thought, this process, this history, this culture, this mathematics, because each dance is a mathematical formula. Like the first dance we did was Tonantzin, which was Mother Earth. You play the drum beat, that beat, and you know that you're talking about Mother Earth. The second dance we did was Venado. You play that drum beat, you hear the footwork, the steps, that movement, and you know you're talking about Venado. And it's a way of teaching that is very similar to what happened in, quote, pre-Columbian times. So the tradition hasn't changed that much. Some of the accoutrements have, of course. We don't have quetzal feathers. We don't have the jade or the gold, perhaps a little silver, some shells, but those have been taken away from us, or we don't have access to them anymore. The trade has not been allowed to happen between the lower part of this hemisphere to the upper part of this hemisphere. So some of the trade of indigenous peoples have not been allowed to happen. But the intent is still the same, to find, like this church, find a path of sacredness for the people to follow, to be, to fulfill. And I take note of the concept of Jesus. I think more in a broader term, that in a way to find a common denominator amongst people, that we say the Great Spirit, or you say Jesus, you say Great Spirit, and it becomes interchangeable. It becomes, the concept of Jesus is, ¿cómo se dice? Something bigger, in that it's not just the word Jesus. I know a lot of people still take offense and will not come in a church because of the atrocities that Christianity has done to this hemisphere, yeah, and worldwide. But I take the concept of what Jesus represents as a path similar to what indigenous people are taking, that path towards that enlightenment, that path towards well-being, that path towards peace, that path towards sacredness. So you could use the word Christianity, you can use the word Jesus, you can use what we now know in your concept teachings of Christianity as a way to be better people. And you can say those same things in indigenous ways. Walk the red road. And it's very similar. We just are using a different language, maybe. Yeah. But the concepts, the basic concepts are the same. So I hope that humanity can eventually let go of the fear so that they can see that we as humanity can come to balance and peace. It may just be a different shade, somebody's wearing a t-shirt, somebody's wearing a dress, somebody's wearing some pants, somebody's wearing a polo shirt, a button-up shirt, but it's all clothing that you put on to dress yourself. It's how you choose to dress yourself. I choose to wear feathers, shells, but it's the same thing. We are dressing ourselves or preparing ourselves so that we can step out, so we can be out there in a good way, in the best way we can.
I love that. And I love the thought, too, of holding on to the sacred and trying to let that guide us in the midst of, Christianity has such a complicated history and a deplorable history in a lot of ways of colonialization and of oppression and violence. And so there is this goal, I think, that we too have to try and hold on to what is sacred and what is good about the tradition, and to let go of some of those things that are hurtful and harmful that the Christian tradition has been about. And so I think in a very similar way that we try to put on the best Christian clothes that we can that help us to relate best to the sacred mystery that is beyond us. So I so respect the thought of that and how that goes. Could you tell us just a little bit more about maybe some of the dances that we saw this morning? You told us a little bit about that and what's involved and what's happening.
Well, hopefully we'll get to be able to share, those who would want to. Our next dance, our last dance, would be Tlaloc. And as I said, each dance is a mathematical formula. And of course, these dances can be done for days and days and days, not just a couple of times around the drum. Each dance is a pattern or a rhythm, and it's how we teach, not only through movement, not only through the sonic, as Western scientists are now understanding how sound can transform things, can heal things, can bring balance. It's not only through the sound and the rhythm and the dance, but also, like we're doing right now, what we would call this a plática, a talk. So we have a time to sit with each other. Usually we dance and we sit in a circle. Why in a circle? Because we believe, can I have some more smoke? That each person has an equal access, how do you call it? Equal opportunity to the sacred drum, to the sacred smoke, the smoke carrying our thoughts, our prayers as they call them now. And the smoke, the smell, and I apologize if some of you are not dealing well with it, but this is something that is sacred to us. Most indigenous peoples of this hemisphere carry the sacred smoke as something, the sacred white smoke, as something that is tangible because you can actually see it. It's like, oh, these are my thoughts I can actually see. And so it helps you to remember to think about what you're going to think before you think it, so to speak, so that you are not just having willy-nilly little thoughts in your head or way of speaking, so that your thoughts and your tongue, your speech, what you're saying, is said in a good way, in an honorable and honest way. And everybody has access to that in a circle. So that brings an immediate physicalization of a concept, which is what danza is. They are physicalizations of concepts. You are actually, like you do the body of Christ. That's a physical action that you are doing. We are physically engaging in life. We're actually engaging it on a small scale and seeing how it relates on a larger scale as well. So that the smoke is hard as the blood of the tree, the sap, the copal as we call it. And when it gets hot, it melts and dissipates and then starts to create the white smoke. And so like a thought that is here within us, in our heart, it is here, and then it goes out, and it goes out, and you may not see it. You may not see the smoke, the particles, the molecules, the atoms, the neutrons, the protons. You may no longer be able to see it, but that does not mean it is not there. Like prayer. You may not be able to see prayer. That does not mean it is not there. You can see it here. You experience it here while you are here in this building, in this congregation, coming together, communion together. You feel it and you see it. We feel it, we see it when we dance, this sacred energy. And just because we go out these doors, we go change into our everyday clothes, does not mean that the sacred is no longer there. Just like when you go out these doors, everything that you experience here, you keep it within yourselves. And if only humanity could hold on to those moments, remember the sacred smoke, remember the songs and the vibration of the piano, remember the vibration, the songs of the holy words, the holy thoughts, the sacred thoughts. Your harmony that you make here, if only you can hold on to that as you go out that door. And that's why they say you walk the red road. Danza is not just right here, this moment in the hour we're going to be here. Christianity is not just this moment, this hour you are here. It is a way of life.
Amen. Yeah. As they say in our tradition, preach. That's right. I love it. And I think I would love to sit here and talk all day, and this is so fascinating. And I just want to thank you for sharing and for being vulnerable enough to talk to us about this tradition. And you have greatly enriched our spirits here today by your presence. I do want to make sure we have enough time for the ending dance and for us to head out into coffee chat. And I would just want to say thank you again for being here. Will you all give her another round of applause? And I think you all are going to be invited to participate. And so if you'd like to stand, if you would like to come forward, you're welcome to come forward and participate, or you're welcome to stay where you are.